Hello, hello, hello. How are you all doing today? Thanks for being here with me today. Sure do appreciate it. Today I am going to go over an execution. I'm starting with the executions for 2026 since we are currently in 2026. It's something that I'm going to try and keep up with. So today's story is going to be on what was the first execution of the year. And that was on Charles Victor Thompson. Now, he was 55 years old, and he was born on June 13th, 1970. He was 55 years old when he was executed at the Huntsville Unit, Texas, in Texas, at 6:50 p.m. on January 28, 2026, marking the first U.S. execution of 2026. Now, he had been sentenced to death in April of 1999 for the murders of his former girlfriend, Glenda Denise Hayslip, and her new boyfriend, Darren Keith Kane. And those murders occurred on April 30th of 1998 in Tomball, which is a Houston suburb. Now, Thompson had previously gained nationwide attention for a 2005 jail escape, making him the only death row inmate to successfully escape a U.S. correctional facility in the 21st century. So, before I get into today's story, if you haven't already done so, I would appreciate if you would go ahead and subscribe to my channel. It would help me out greatly. I would sure appreciate it. Hit that thumbs up button for me. But let's go ahead and get into it. So, on the night of April 29th, 1998, police were called to Glenda's apartment due to a domestic disturbance involving Charles and Darren, so the ex-boyfriend and the new boyfriend. Now, officers escorted Charles out of the apartment, but Charles later returned 3 hours later with a firearm. He kicked in the door and shot Darren 4 times in the neck and chest, killing him instantly. Thankfully, Glenda's 13-year-old son, Wade, he was at school at the time of the shootings. Thank goodness. Charles then turned around and shot Glenda in the face, causing catastrophic injuries. She was transported to a hospital, but she died days later after being taken off life support. And the murders were motivated by Charles' jealousy, his possessiveness. Following the incapacitation of Darren, Charles focused his attention on Glenda. Like I said, he had reloaded his gun and turned to her and said, "I can shoot you too, bitch." The bullet entered through her cheek, destroyed her dentures, and severed her tongue. After the shootings, Charles disposed of the murder weapon in a nearby creek. He then went to a friend's house. Her name was Diane Zernia, and he told her everything that he just did. He then called his father and told his father what he did. Now, thankfully, his father facilitated his surrender to the police. Yay, Dad. Now, following Charles' arrest, he stood trial for capital murder. The death penalty was requested by the prosecution, and to secure the death sentence, the state was required to prove that he would be a danger to everybody in the future. So, what the prosecution did, they introduced evidence of solicitation to another murder plot that Charles initiated while he was in pretrial detention. While he was awaiting trial, he approached an inmates. They went by the names Reed and Humphrey. Well, they didn't go by the names Reed and Humphrey. That was their last names. So, ignore me here. But he approached them to arrange the murder of his friend Diane Zernia, the one whose house he went to tell her what he did before. He identified her as being the only witness that was capable of linking him to the homicides, so he wanted her gone. Now, law enforcement was tipped off by Reed, and they orchestrated an undercover operation where an investigator posed as a hitman. So he met with Charles in a visiting booth, and he wore a wire to record their conversation. Charles offered him $1,500 to go and retrieve the murder weapon from Cypress Creek and then to go murder Diane. Charles displayed a hand-drawn map. He put it up against the glass, which showed the weapon's location, and it provided details of Diane's family and her vehicles to try and facilitate this murder. Now, the defense tried to claim that Charles did not kill Glenda, not saying that he didn't shoot her, but they're saying he didn't kill her. They said she died as a result of medical negligence during her hospitalization. They said medical staff failed to correctly place a nasotracheal tube and then failed to monitor her breathing, allowing her to fall into a coma. They argued that by the family removing her from life support 1 week after the shooting constituted an intervening cause that absolved him of criminal responsibility for her death. Unbelievable. But thankfully, a jury found that Charles' actions were the primary cause of death and convicted him of capital murder and sentenced him to death in April 14th of 1999. Now, in 2005, he was granted a retrial without that investigator, the one who posed as the hitman, as evidence. So, to provide evidence of Charles' violent tendencies, the state called a different jailhouse informant. This person testified that while he was detained with Charles in 1998, Charles solicited him to murder a hit list of potential state witnesses. He said the list included none other than the friend Diane Zernia, as well as other witnesses, with instructions to either kill them or persuade them not to be there. And on October 28, 2005, a new jury sentenced him to death. Now, following his second death sentence, Charles was held in the Harris County Jail pending transfer to Livingston, and on November 3, 2005, he executed a brazen escape that exposed systemic negligence within the facility. He somehow smuggled several items into his cell using a binder, which inmates are permitted to keep. It says he smuggled in a binder. But these items included a handcuff key, a fake identification badge, which I can see fitting in a binder, but also a set of civilian clothing consisting of khaki pants and a dark blue shirt and white tennis shoes. How did that fit in a binder? He later claimed that a sergeant had found a previous set of smuggled clothes, but confiscated them as contraband without reporting the incident to the DA's office. How did this man get two different sets of clothing? Now, I understand this was quite some time ago. 21 years ago. Things changed a little bit, maybe. But still, I mean. Anyway, on the afternoon of November 3rd, he was taken to a visitor's room for what he claimed was a meeting with his attorney. And once alone, he slipped out of his handcuffs, changed out of his orange jumpsuit, and into the smuggled civilian clothes. He then walked toward the exit, flashing his fake ID badge, which it stated he was a state investigator with the Attorney General's office. Now, he showed this badge to 4 different jail employees. 4. Again, I know this was 21 years ago and things have changed, but 4 different employees. He bluffed his way past the final guards at the front door and just calmly walked out. He took a freight train to East Texas, where he stayed in an open boxcar, and he described his experience as an adventure where he felt dirty and happy. He said, I got to smell the trees, feel the wind in my hair, grass under my feet, and see the stars at night. It took me straight back to my childhood, being outside on a summer night. I'm sure Glenda would like to be back experiencing that as well. He eventually reached Shreveport, Louisiana, where he stole a bicycle and begged for money, posing as a Hurricane Katrina evacuee. He escaped. The escape ended at a payphone outside of a liquor store on November 6th. Acting on a tip, police found him intoxicated while he was attempting to call friends overseas to arrange a wire transfer for a planned flight to Canada. He was then extradited back to Texas. So he begged for money, bought liquor, got stoned-ass drunk, thankfully, because that's what got him caught. He executed his 8 appeals, and on September 11th, 2025, he received his death warrant, scheduling him to be executed by lethal injection on January 28th, 2026. So, a little about Glenda. She owned her own nail salon, and she worked 6 days a week as a nail technician. She, at the time, was divorced from her son's father since 1996, when her son, Wade, was just 11 years old. His father, Felix, was a mechanic. Now, Wade is currently the father of 3 boys, and he lives in Chicago, and he works in business development. He said his family never had a lot of money growing up, but that his mom prioritized paying for private school for spiritual and educational reasons. He said, there were times we knew when she wrote checks that were probably going to bounce, but somehow she managed. She worked hard and made sure they never went hungry. He said his mother was compassionate, humble, and taught him to always look out for others. He recalled one time he told his mom that he was going to go hang out with a new friend, and this new friend happened to be an outcast at school because he had a severe medical condition. He said that she started crying because she was so proud of him. He also recalled a bad argument that he once had with his mother. He said he yelled at her that he was going to go run away, and he proceeded to climb 30 feet up into a tree. And he said, of course, I was giving her heart palpitations and was begging me to come down, in tears, apologizing, even though I was the one in the wrong. He said he came down nearly 5 hours later and was still pouting in his bed when his mother went in. He said he was mad for a completely ridiculous reason, as most kids get mad at their parents for ridiculous reasons. But instead of trying to get at him, she went in, laid down in his bed, and they talked it through. She was letting him know that it was okay. After her death, he said his father was so heartbroken, saying that they were still in love, but they just couldn't handle living together. Wade said the day of the funeral, they had an alone moment while they watched them lower the casket into the ground. And they sat there for about 30 minutes while his dad just sat there and cried. His dad unfortunately died in 2009, just 1 month before he was going to become a grandfather for the first time. So both his parents missed out on becoming grandparents. And he said his mother would have been the spoiling type. So, yes. When Charles was executed, his witnesses included his family members of the victims and Charles' father, who observed from a separate chamber. In his final words, Charles apologized to the victims' families and expressed remorse and stated, "There are no winners in this situation. It creates more victims and traumatizes more people." 28 years later, he said, "I am sorry for what I did. I'm sorry for what happened. And I want to tell you I love you and that keep Jesus in your life. Keep Jesus first." He encouraged the families to find forgiveness and maintain their faith. And the execution process lasted approximately 22 minutes, during which he gasped loudly, took about a dozen breaths, and had about 3 snores, and then ceased movement before being pronounced dead 22 minutes later. Now, interestingly, or not interestingly, he made the news when the Houston Chronicle had reported a story that he sought companionship by starting his own website not long after he landed on death row. And he wrote on this website, "I am a firm believer that everyone needs someone in their life, and I need you. I am a very interesting person with a lot of character. I just need someone to share that with." Now, again, another thing I find odd. He had over 500 supporters on a Facebook page that was called Friends of Charles Victor Thompson. This page is run by a woman in Wales who had raised money for his legal defense by posting t-shirts for sale and directing people to his Patreon account. Now, to each their own. I know there's people out there who support people on death row or just in prison in general. But do they not realize he killed 2 people in cold blood? Not by accident, on purpose, in cold blood. Now, Wade, Glenda's son, refutes Charles' repeated claims that he asked for forgiveness. And he said his pain has been compounded over the years by all the press attention on Charles and by occasional hate mail that he receives from people who sympathize with Charles. There was actually one woman who wrote Wade a letter that said, "Always know that your mom was a cheating whore." And Wade just said, "That's part of the grieving process. I've mourned and grieved her loss, but it's still been an active thing because he has been so visible in the public eye. Because of his visibility, it's been tough to move forward. That has overshadowed who she was and what she represented." Now, he did travel to Houston for the execution. He said it wouldn't bring him closure, but that Charles' life is the only thing he has left to offer and accountability for the lives he destroyed. It's more of the end of a chapter and the beginning of a new one. And he said, I am looking forward to a new one. Now, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on this. Do you believe in the death penalty? Do you agree with the execution? Do you agree with the fact that he was able to have his own website, Looking for Love, when he took that away from Glenda? What's your thoughts on the Facebook page that was created for him, for people to support him? Curious what your thoughts are. Let me know. I'll see you next time.